Good evening and a very warm welcome to you all from all abroad, from Holland, from Germany, from Poland, from Turkey and from Hungary. My dear students, now the time is there. We're going to have a citizens' dialogue. We would like to say more, but we are short in time. So you have been working on this project Made in Europe. And now this evening we will talk about what binds Europe. Youth can bind Europe, but how? In what way? How do they see it? And therefore we are most pleased and really overwhelmed because it was very difficult to get him. This evening he had to be at the Commission of Negotiations of Cyprus. This was going to start this evening. He had to stand in for Mr. Juncker, but he is here, Mr. Frans Timmermans. My name is Reinoud Diele. I am the coordinator of this project, and I would like to welcome all the parents too, and all those who are interested guests. Very honored to be here. I give the word to Mr. Erik Korton, our moderator.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Diele. Good evening, everybody. Hello, my name is Erik. I think a lot of you might not know me, but I will be the moderator of this evening. So what we're going to do, you are going to ask questions. Yes. And the first Vice President, Mr. Timmermans, is going to answer your questions. That's what we're going to do later on. I'll explain to you how we are going to do it, because we are going to do it in a very civilized way, obviously. Yes. But first, I would like to introduce you to Lem van Eupen. She's the director of the national agency Erasmus+, for a short word. Here you go.
Thank you. Very honored to be here. Here in the Netherlands, we have a lot of old people who still remember how things used to be in Europe, with closed borders and with money you had to change at each and every border, and even with wars. And we have young people here who have grown up in a time where Europe was what it is today, with open borders, with one currency. And after all this time, all of us tend to take it for granted, this peaceful Europe, this prosperous, relatively prosperous Europe that we have. And we tend to forget the huge advantages of this collaboration in Europe that we have today. And we tend to focus on the negative sides, on the bureaucracy, for example. So sometimes it's good to take a step back and realize what we have together. And I'm really impressed that a group of young people from various countries in Europe have gone for a quest together to look for what we have in common. What is this European heritage? And what are our common values, the things we share and that bind us together rather than divide us? And we are extremely happy that from the program Erasmus+, we have been able to support that project financially. And I'm looking very much forward to hearing what you have to say tonight and to learn from what you have been learning in the project. Thank you.
Well, now I hope you are all ready for the question asking part of the evening. He was already introduced, but I'll introduce him again because the round of applause that you just did was just for practice. Because now we're going to do the real round of applause because he's here, and I'm very happy to introduce him, the first Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Frans Timmermans. So, one short word of welcome maybe to everybody over here.
It's great to be here, and it's great to see so many young people from so many different European nations, all with a different background, but with the same future. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions. Very excited about this evening, and let's try and make it a great evening so we take back fond memories when we go home again.
Are there any off-limit questions?
No off-limit questions.
Okay.
You can ask anything you like. You might not get the answer you want, but you can ask anything you like.
So the overarching theme of this evening is Youth Binds Europe. And obviously, you are the youth. We're going to subdivide that into 6 subdivisions, but we'll start with the first one, which is called Heritage and Legacy of Europe, which is going to be introduced through a PowerPoint presentation. Who prepared a PowerPoint presentation? Nobody? Okay. Did somebody prepare questions about the heritage and legacy of Europe?
It's like the European Council. Okay, who wants the floor?
Yeah,
you, Angela. Angela, you want to say something? No, then we go to somebody else.
Yes. So if we just, if there's nobody who has prepared a PowerPoint presentation, then we just might skip that and do the question part, because you definitely have questions, do you? Okay. Nope. If you have a question about So it is you!
Busted!
Okay, now step over here. We all want to see you very clear. Come on.
Yay!
Okay, guys. Now, okay. Wow. Breathe in, breathe out. I'll pass you the microphone. Here you go. And introduce yourself to the first vice president, please.
Well, my name is George, and I'm from the German school in Budapest.
Yeah, and my name is Batant.
From the same school.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we had to make a PowerPoint presentation about European heritage, and we divided it into 3 main points. One was culture, background, and belief. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And society, we also think, plays a big role in European heritage, because it differentiates from country to country, which is shown by different cultures, as said before. And there's some people who feel stronger and weaker.
I don't know. Who's controlling the PowerPoint? Are you? Oh, he's controlling the PowerPoint. Okay.
Terug, hij moet terug.
Back.
Yeah, here we are.
So we think that society has stronger and weaker proudness. So people have stronger and weaker proudness about their heritage, and sometimes society tries to alter their mindset by, for example, propaganda in social media, and such that social media, we think, plays a big role about that. Yeah. Now next.
Next.
And just generally about heritage. Everybody shares the same feeling deep down, because everybody deep down has some European heritage or any heritage of that kind. And it doesn't matter where you come from, but it alters, but it's shared by all. And a lot of people like to share their culture or their heritage, and but are accepting of learning.
Next.
Yep, here we are.
Yeah, for Hungary wrote down that we are really proud for our heritage, and we also show our heritage, and we also like to share it with other countries and other people, also on social media. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for your.
Thank you, guys. Don't worry, there's a lot of people always at war with PowerPoint presentations. European heritage. Just what is that? What is that?
Well, you know, we're all from somewhere. And you can't be a European if you're not first from somewhere else. Interesting, if you look at the media in my own country, in this country, when the regional media from the province of Limburg, where I'm from, write about me, they write Frans Timmermans from Heerlen, because that's where I live. When the national media write about me, it's Limburger Frans Timmermans, from the province. When in Brussels they write about me, it's the Dutchman Frans Timmermans. And when I was on Bloomberg News in the United States a couple of weeks ago, it's the European Frans Timmermans. It's all the same person, but it all depends on the perspective you have. And I can't be a European if I'm not first a Dutchman, and I can't be a Dutchman if I'm not from somewhere in the Netherlands, a province, and I can't be from that province if I'm not from a city or a town in that province. And that applies to every single European. Now, the issue is, and that's what I liked in the presentation, are you proud of where you're from and you want to share that with others? That makes you a real patriot. Are you proud of where you are, but you look down on others? That makes you a nationalist. And that is what leads to confrontation in Europe. If you see other Europeans and you look at them with curiosity because you want to share who you are and talk about your heritage and listen to somebody else's heritage, then you develop a sense of patriotism that is very productive on the European scale. But if you really need to feel better by looking down on others, then there's something that will go wrong, because that's our experience in European history. So there's a clear distinction between being a patriot and being a nationalist. And patriotism is what we need in Europe. Nationalism we can do better without.
Okay. So that's a beautiful definition of heritage, European heritage. Questions on this subject? If you want to ask Mr. Timmermans a question, just raise your hand. And if I point it out to you, then just state your name and ask your question, please. Questions? Yes, go ahead.
So, I'm Nora Yunus from Hungary, and in your essay you talk about two groups of the young generation who have elements of segregation between each other. And our question would be that how do you think we could restore the communication between these groups, and could this program, for example, be good for that, and how you meant these segregation elements?
Thank you for your beautiful question. I think if the temptation of today in European society, but perhaps also in wider society in the Western world, is that we look for people who are like us and who think like us, and then we sit together and we feel very comfortable because we agree, and oh my God, isn't it nice to agree? But in a society like ours with so many differences, we need a place where we meet each other, even if we passionately disagree, that we still have the ability to talk to each other and to listen to each other. You know, the only thing that really distinguishes us from animals is the capacity to look through the eyes of another person. If I'm interested in you and I want to hear where you're from Budapest, what your parents are doing, or whatever, wherever you are, I'm not sure whether you're from Budapest, but imagine. And you start telling me about this, and I start imagining what it would be like to be in your shoes, then I start looking at the world through your eyes. And what do I see? What is the first thing I see then? Myself. So the best way of knowing yourself is to develop the capacity to look at the world through somebody else's eyes. And for that, you know, you don't have to look through the eyes of somebody who's just like you. You have to find it interesting to talk to people who are not like you. And this is ever more important in European society because divisions are growing and they're not becoming smaller. Social divisions, national divisions, and we don't need that. We need to come closer together. And you see, I was talking to the people from this school earlier, and even within a school, if you live in a different world, culturally or socially, you need to make an extra effort to talk to the other person. And I find Europe is at its best when we are curious about somebody else, and we are curious about other people. There was a great man I once knew who sadly died recently. His name is Shimon Peres. He was president of Israel before he died, and he once said to me, the two driving forces that make the world better is curiosity and dissatisfaction. So you're curious about new things and you're not happy with the world as it is. And that defines, I think, the young generation of Europeans. You're curious and you're not satisfied with the world as it is. And that will be the driving force for positive change in Europe. So be interested in somebody else, even if you don't understand them yet.
Is that a personal concern of yours? The curiosity of young European people in each other's culture, for example? Is that something you are concerned about how the young people of Europe could unite and learn from each other and be curious, like what the first Vice President says?
I think it's just a thing about personality. I don't think it's a huge problem or issue that is now actually happening in Europe and between us. So look at us now. We are here. I don't think that everyone is the same, for example, and we get along very well, and I think this is very good, and it's not an issue that we all have in Europe and the youth. I think it's just about the personality and some people's mind setting, but this can't be changed on a European level and doesn't have to be.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Can I see hands, please, so I can address? Yes, here you go.
Do I stand?
Yeah, please.
Well, I'm Simon from Holland, and I have a question. You were talking about European heritage and patriotism and nationalism, so I was wondering, because European also has like an ideology. We all these different countries, we came together to unite and become the European Union. So I was wondering if we want to spread the European ideology around the world.
I think, you know, we all have our peculiar histories, and European history is peculiar. What defines us Europeans is that for centuries, every 30 years, we would go to war with each other. There are very few nations in Europe that did not at some stage kill each other. Because of demographic change, more people were born in one country, or the economy went well in one country and worse in another country. So there was always this feeling that you needed to be safe by dominating other Europeans. Now, in the last century, this attitude led to two wars that almost killed Europe. And that certainly led to the Second World War, to dozens of deaths in Europe. So after that experience, people were thinking, how can we organize this diverse Europe in a way that we don't feel the need to dominate other Europeans? How do we do that? And that's where the European project was born. You create areas where you have common interest and where you give and take. You know, for instance, we started with coal and steel. We said coal and steel would no longer be a national responsibility. We share that responsibility at the European level. Why coal and steel? Because at the time, you needed coal to make steel, and you needed steel to make guns. So if you put that under international control, European control, you could check whether a nation was preparing to build up a war industry, to build guns. And this took away some of the anxiety between nations, and the feeling to dominate disappeared. It's the same thing with the common market. Germany wanted free trade, and the Netherlands and some other countries. France had a huge problem with its agricultural population. The countryside in France was almost dying at the time, so they made a deal. We have a common agricultural policy so that we save our rural areas in Europe, and we look for free trade, so we help industry in Europe. And that's step by step how we built Europe. Now, the most important thing I've experienced in my life, and it's wonderful to have young people from Poland and Hungary here today, something that for you is history, but for me is living memory, is the end of the European divide. We, in our part of Europe, were free immediately after the Second World War. People in Hungary and Poland had to wait decades until 1989 before they could have a taste of freedom. And now, the biggest gift to your generation is that Europe is now one area. There's no wall in the middle of Europe. There's no ideological confrontation anymore. There's no armed confrontation anymore. And this is a huge gift of previous generations to you. And it's now up to you to make the best of that gift. And I'm so confident you will make a great, great success of this. Why? You are the healthiest generation in European history, the smartest generation in European history. You are true Europeans, not because you want to come and work at the Commission or you like the European Parliament. That's nothing to do with Brussels. You're true Europeans because your natural habitat is Europe. And that is a huge, huge gift. And that takes away some of the risks in our common European history. And that makes us different than any other part in the world. And I think this is a tremendous success. Now we always talk about things that don't work well, and there are many things that don't work well. But we should never forget that the whole idea behind the European project was peace, was for Europeans to stop fighting each other. And that is your legacy.
Are you really confident with the fact that we were just talking about patriotism and nationalism, with upcoming nationalism all over Europe? Are you really confident that Europe is able to stick together in that way?
I was more pessimistic 2 years ago than I am today. I'm more optimistic today. Why? Because I see sort of your generation and those slightly older than you are in sort of how should I say this? Are in an awakening process. Why am I saying this? Until recently, most people under 30 or under 35 said, okay, there's many things we can criticize in Europe, and we don't like it, and we bash Europe all the time because we're not happy, but the basic things will continue. Now we saw that nothing is unbreakable. Nothing is unbreakable. The European Union isn't unbreakable. European peace and security isn't unbreakable. So across the European Union, you see, like in Germany, you've seen, and this is now spreading to other nations, Pulse of Europe. People going into the streets, young people saying, we believe in this project and we want this project to be successful. But also in the recent elections in the United Kingdom, a whole new generation all of a sudden went to the ballot boxes and expressed their vote. This is really an awakening of a generation. And perhaps because I'm a dad, I don't know, but I remain extremely optimistic because I have so much confidence in your generation. I don't think, although small groups of young people in Europe are susceptible to be tempted by either a jihadist message or a nationalist message, but the vast majority of your generation is not tempted by that ideology. You are post-ideological, but you're very idealistic. I hope you understand what I mean. You no longer need an ideology to build your own home. You can build your own home with your ideals. You pick your ideals, you combine your ideals, and you build your future with those ideals with other young people. And that's why I'm confident that we will overcome this phase of nationalism, we overcome this phase of confrontation, and we will build Europe in your image, which is a Europe where everybody can feel free to be who they are or who they want to be.
Thank you. I think we should go on to the second subcategory, which is values and achievements of Europe, which will be led in by a short movie.
We're here in the inner city of Munich and about to ask people what values and achievements of Europe means to them.
Europa. Das ist für mich eigentlich eine Vereinigung von Staaten, die der Sicherheit dient. Also nicht nur so, wie es allgemein immer heißt, eine Wirtschaftsunion, sondern vor allem das friedliche Zusammenleben von den Menschen hier in diesem Teil der Welt.
Europa bedeutet für mich, in jedem Moment einfach losreisen zu können mit der Währung, die ich dabei habe, mit meinem normalen Personalausweis, durch mehrere Länder zu reisen.
Liberty and universal freedom, culture, music, vacations.
Europa ist für mich die Wertengemeinschaft. Das sind die ganzen Staaten, die daran beteiligt sind und sich integrieren und dass die Grenzen offen sind, ohne dass man überall wieder Ausweise vorzeigen muss. Das ist das, was mich an Europa am meisten freut.
Hinreisen kann und dass man überall mit dem gleichen Geld bezahlen kann, dass Europa sich eigentlich wunderbar verständigt, das Kerneuropa zumindest. Aber ich finde nicht so gut die Vorschriften, die doch sehr weitreichenden Vorschriften, die von der EU, von der Kommission kommen.
Für mich bedeutet Europa ja einfach Vereinigung von mehreren Ländern, wo man super einen schönen Urlaub machen kann, wo man zu Hause ist, Heimat.
Neben freiem Reisen und einer einheitlichen Währung einfach das Thema auch der Größe des Landes. Wir stehen heute gegenüber Ländern wie China, USA und so weiter. Und wir können als einzelnes kleines Land nicht mehr bestehen. Wir brauchen Europa aus sozialen Gründen, um Frieden zu haben.
Also Europa ist für mich ein Zusammenhalt von vielen Ländern und jeder hilft jedem.
Yes, Mr. Timmermans, values and achievements of Europe. I heard somebody say, wherever I lay my head, that's my home. And I can do that without traveling with an ID card, for example. Is that one of the big achievements?
Apparently,
yeah.
According to the people who were interviewed. But I think just a small nuance, I believe, that you only feel at home in another place if you feel comfortable at your real home. You know, being able to travel without borders, with the same currency, is a great thing if you are happy and secure in your own home. And the problem is that many people who say this, especially Munich, are doing extremely well. They have a job, they have job security, they feel happy. And so for them, opening up is a sense of being even freer. But for people who are not sure about their future, not sure about their job, openness can also mean competition. Somebody's coming to get my job. So I love this idea of this Europe open and free, but it only works if we make sure that people are happy where they are. Because if needing to move somewhere else is the only option you have because you're unhappy at home, it's not a good feeling.
No. Okay, questions. Can I see hands for the questions on values and achievements of Europe? Don't be shy. We're not biting yet. Yes, there. Can we get a microphone up there? Yes. State your name, please, and ask your question.
Okay. I'm Dominika. I'm from Poland, and it's about values. How do you think religions have influenced the developments of today's European values? Is, in your opinion, this impact negative or positive? Have religions been a reliable way that has led us to the values we profess today, or on the contrary, has the liberation from religion been necessary for us to reach European values? Has any of the religions had a higher and more unique influence than other religions? How do you think?
Well, I think with religions, it's like with nationalities. If you can only feel comfortable and proud about your own religion, if you have to put it above other religions, then there's something wrong. I think your religion should be something that belongs to you, that's your own choice. And freedom of religion means that you can make your own choice. But it also means that you cannot impose your choice on somebody else, because they also have the freedom to make their own choice. And your question is an extremely complicated one if you look back into the history of Europe. Some claim that Europe is only a result of Christianity. Others say Judeo-Christianity. Others say Judaism, Christianity, humanism. Everybody has his own take on that. But my take would be the following. I was in Germany on Friday at a theater festival where they celebrated 500 years of Reformation with a theater piece about Luther, Martin Luther. He wanted the church to reform. He wanted the church to stay closer to its ideals, to its norms, to its values. But the church saw this as an attack 500 years ago on the establishment, on their position. So they confronted him and they excommunicated him and they said he didn't belong anymore. After he died, Europe had almost 100 years of religious wars before we found a solution in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. So we had almost 100 years of constant fighting, Protestants against Catholics, and everything was okay to kill the other because they were an abomination in the eye of God, depending on the perspective you have. Today this sounds ridiculous. There are still differences between Christian churches, but on the whole they agree on the same values. This also happened because of the Age of Enlightenment, when people were questioning the role of religions and when people were advocating the separation of church and state. This is also something that would help religion to be a personal choice and not something that is imposed on a community or a society by public authorities. And so I believe it's a complicated question, that therefore I have to give you a slightly complicated answer. I think visions of religion are about the relationship, if you want, between man and God, or are about the morality of human behavior. And without Christianity and Judaism, we would not have been able to develop this concept of morality in Europe. But we needed the Age of the Enlightenment and the idealism not based on religion to put this into a wider perspective and to offer religion, to offer the possibility of citizens to make their own personal choice, to say that man and God, if you believe in God, can create a better equilibrium that is not an imposition on individuals or communities. So all of this is part of our heritage. And I think not one denomination has the monopoly on being the fathers and mothers of Europe. Not one denomination has the monopoly of being evil. We all have our mistakes, we all have our advantages, and the beauty of Europe is that we have created a sphere where all these differences can live together. The threat of that is that if we refuse dialogue, then of course we go back to confrontations of the past. But what I don't like, I'm a Christian myself, but I don't want to say to others, Europe is Christian or is not, as some would argue, because I think that is not a historically correct affirmation. There should be room for everyone, whether they believe in God or don't believe in God, whether they believe in one or the other Christian God, whether they're Jewish or Muslim, whatever. Everybody deserves a place in our Europe.
Thank you for your question. More questions on this subject, values and achievements of Europe? Yes?
My name is Esse from Rotterdam, and in the video a man said that he wants Europe to be there to compete and to stand a chance against big countries like China and the United States. There's the argument that Europe is very divided and that the leadership of the European Union doesn't really have a lot of power. So my question is if you are in favor of the European army, and if you think that the executive branch of government of the European Union needs to be more powerful and maybe to be elected democratically instead of indirectly.
First of all, I don't believe in the concept of a European army, but I do believe in much closer cooperation at the European level. We are wasting too much of taxpayers' money because every individual country does its own thing and they don't coordinate enough. I believe countries should specialize in what they're good at in defense and then combine this at the European level. But that is, and to have a common headquarters, to have common analysis, to have common approaches, that I believe in. But one European army, not in my lifetime, I think. But we need to work closer together. We need to make sure that we use each other's capacities to the full potential. Because if you compare what European taxpayers collectively pay for defense, and you compare that to what the Americans pay for defense, Americans pay more. But they also get relatively much more out of the taxpayers' money than we do because we are too divided. So we need to combine that much more. On the issue of political leadership, you know, it is only a matter of political will. We don't need to create new structures for Europe to be more united. We need the will of the leaders of our nations. And I am becoming more optimistic about this. You had the Bratislava summit not long ago, the Rome Declaration, where 27 remaining members of the European Union said, we want to work close together in a number of areas. Defense is one of them. And we don't need to change the rules to do that. It just takes political will. And I have to say that people look at Brexit, and then people look at who was elected president in the United States. And an overwhelming majority of Europeans then say, no, we rather do something differently. And that, I think, is one of the driving forces now of European nations coming closer together again. So we've gone through the worst phases of the economic crisis and survived that. We've gone through the worst phases of the migration crisis and are coming to terms with that. We still have a huge challenge to fight terrorism and insecurity at our borders, but we also see that the choice made by the British people, which is their full right to do that, or the choice made by the American people, these are not choices that are shared by the majority of Europeans. The majority of Europeans would rather make other choices, and that inspires me to continue with our work. I don't need to change the treaties for that. I just need the political will of the European people and of the leaders of Europe to come together. Just one example, well, there's students from Poland and Hungary here. You know that the leadership in your two countries is very, very anti-Commission at this stage. Anti-me personally very often, but also anti-Commission. That is their full right, their political right. But they are also very careful to listen to their population, because in both countries, an overwhelming majority of people, they might not be that interested in us or what we do or our structures. They might even be very critical of us. But they want to be members of the European Union, and they want to stay in the European Union. And that is a message that is very, very clear also to the leadership of those countries. And that's why I believe we will find common ground and we will shape the future of Europe together with all 27 nations.
Do we have one last question on this subject? Somebody, raise your hand, please. Then I have a little question.
Yes, sure.
with the UK leaving the European Union, with the Brexit, is that a significant devaluation of the political power of Europe?
Well, it's not good news.
No.
I think, you know, if one of the biggest member states leaves the European Union, it makes us all weaker. And especially makes that member state weaker, in my view. But okay, that's their choice. They have the right to make that choice. So we have to make the best of a bad situation. The Brits have decided. Now we need to make sure we have a separation that takes into account the interest of everyone, the 27, but also the United Kingdom. I think our attitude should be not punitive, not punishing, but to do it in a way that does the least harm possible. So then we can get on with our lives, the 27 can get on with building more cooperation in different areas in Europe, and the United Kingdom can get on with what they want to do. So yes, it is a loss for all of us. It is a very, very sad moment after so many years to see one member state deciding to leave. But it's also clear that a new momentum has come in the 27 who don't want to follow that path, because, you know, remember, it's just 1 year ago, 1 year and a couple of days since the vote was in the UK. And at the time, people were saying, this is the first, more are going to follow, the Dutch will be the first to follow. I don't see any support in any member state for leaving the European Union today. And then there were nationalist politicians saying this is going to be a nationalist spring. Well, the spring is over, it's summer, but nothing has happened yet there. So I think at the end of the day, we need to give European citizens more credit. They are more level-headed, they are more focused on their own long-term interests than some politicians believe.
Okay, let's go on to the next subcategory. It's rules and markets of Europe, which will be led in, again, by a short video.
people there are really nice and often friendly, but I met some people who were completely intolerant and rude. My home, I was born there, so obviously I would prefer to be there, but also I need to think about my future. I think my favorite Polish meal are pierogi.
So off to Poland we go. Yes. What's your favorite Polish meal, by the way?
Oof. Probably something with kapusta.
Yeah, probably. I don't know, was this one about borders and restrictions, or was this rules and markets of Europe? Rules and markets, okay, yeah. So then we'll stick to that one, to that subcategory. Rules and markets of Europe. Yeah, there's a lot of ruling going on. There's a lot of European rules. That's one of the most heard things about Europe, that people are saying, it's European rules. We cannot decide that for us, for ourselves anymore, which is a big problem. Is that true?
Well, it's true that we decide many things at the European level, but the fact is that the people who decide at the European level are the same governments who then go home and complain about the fact that they have decided something at the European level. So I think one of the main problems in the public debate is that national governments don't own up to their own responsibility in European decision-making. We at the Commission could make no decisions without first the national governments and European Parliament agreeing with it. They decide. We propose, but they decide. So I think it's about time that member states stop saying that everything that goes well, I did, member state. Everything that doesn't go well, Brussels did. And they're wrong about this. I think this is a game that's been going on for a long, long time. It was a game without risks because the European Union would survive this and would continue. But now that we know that this game, which was played also in the United Kingdom for a long time,
sharpened up,
has contributed to the Brexit vote, then we know that this is not a free game. You can't play this without consequences. If you tell people all the time, I'm good, Brussels is bad, this will go into the heads of people and they will believe it at some point. And I don't think that's a fair assessment. And yes, there are many rules at the European level. But sometimes it reminds me, this debate, I don't know, you're all extremely young, but there's years ago, Milos Forman made a film about the life of Mozart. It's called Amadeus. Yeah. And then the emperor, the Austrian emperor, goes to see Entführung aus dem Serail, which is the first opera Mozart wrote. And afterwards, Mozart goes up to the emperor and he asks, did you like it? Did you like it? Did you like it? And the emperor says, yes, I liked it, but too many notes. And this is what we get a lot. Yes, I like Europe, but too many rules. And my point is, I accept the point, but then be precise. What rules would you like to get rid of? And whenever we have this discussion with member states, what rules would you like to get rid of? More often than not, they would say, well, other rules, not these rules. So we did a huge effort. We have scrapped a lot of rules in the last couple of years. We are making much, much less propositions than in the past. It used to be more than 100 every year. Now we're down to 23 on average per year since this commission came into office. So we have made a tremendous effort. But this public perception will linger on a bit before we have fixed it.
Okay, rules and market of Europe. Questions? Can I see hands, please? Yes, over here.
My name is Joris from the Netherlands.
Hi, Joris.
My question is about the economy.
Yes.
Since the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, do you think that income inequality is a problem in Europe, and why?
It's a huge problem in Europe and in almost every member state. I think this country is the only country where income inequality did not increase at the end of the economic crisis or during the economic crisis. And even in this country, people are worried about inequality. So in most other European countries, inequalities have increased. And between countries, inequalities have increased. And the whole idea about the European integration in the economy is to create convergence. Because the idea is, people ask, why do we have so many billion structural funds going to new member states like Poland and the Czech Republic? Because the inequality, economic and social inequality, is a burden on all of us. And if we can create more economic growth in the poorest parts of Europe, it will benefit all of Europe, because these are new customers, they will buy stuff, they will sell stuff, and we will all profit. Now, in the course of the economic crisis, this idea that this is to everybody's advantage has sort of disappeared. And it's also sort of disappeared because people say, they say, for instance, the banks misbehaved, the financial sector. They got into deep trouble. And then the politicians told us, we need to save the banks. And they put my money, taxpayers' money, billions worth of taxpayers' money into saving the banks. And a couple of years later, the banks are doing fine. But I'm not doing fine. I don't feel much improvement. I worry about my job tomorrow. I worry about the job for my kids. And this creates this feeling of inequality. Even in a rich country like the Netherlands, if some people do much better than other people, the feeling of inequality will persist and people will be unhappy. The thing is, there was more social cohesion in those countries worst affected by the crisis than in those countries less affected by the crisis. There is very interesting. What are the European countries most affected by the crisis? Economic crisis? Greece, obviously, as you know. Cyprus, Spain, Portugal, Ireland. With a slight exception for Greece, none of these countries have extreme right movements. None. There's a small movement in Greece. There's none in Cyprus. There's none in Portugal. There's none in Spain. There's none in Ireland. Where is the extreme right successful? In the richest parts of Europe. Because when you're all in a crisis together, you have the feeling we all need to fight to get out of this crisis. Especially young people showed incredible levels of solidarity in countries like Portugal and Spain and Ireland through this crisis. They had so much to give up, so much, incredible. And it worked, But it's especially in those countries where people believe inequalities are increasing that they opt for more exclusive options. And this brings me to my main point, which is linked to the economy, but which is more of a moral point or a political point. I said earlier, you guys are no longer ideologues. You're idealists, but not ideologues, which I think is a wonderful thing. But I do see in the Western world a big ideological confrontation, even if it's not in a certain political family. People believe in protection by closing off their society. They think, I will be better off if I keep these other people out. I will be better off if I keep these other people away. I don't believe in that concept. I believe in the concept of working together in an open society. And I think this is because I believe in an open society in a world that is changing so rapidly. The more open to difference your society is, the more creative your society will be, and the more successful you will be in the economy. That is my profound belief. apart from the moral issue. And I believe these next couple of years will be about the choice between an open society and a closed society. And the recent elections, French elections, Dutch elections, British elections, show that there is a strong majority of people who believe in an open society. But they will only continue that belief if we are successful also in the economy. And we can only be successful in the economy if we decrease the differences between countries, but also within countries. So, yes, divergence in the country is of extreme importance for our future, and we need to fight against it.
Blij, Joris? Yeah, goed zo. Another question over here. From Munich, I presume. Yeah. Yes, here you go. So, what's your name?
I'm Tilman from Munich. And
Bayern fan?
No, not really. Sorry.
Okay. Just checking.
Sorry.
So we
There's
just
a Dutchman who's doing rather well at Bayern. That's why I'm checking.
So we just talked about big difference in income, like in countries. But my question is about the economical strength between countries in Europe.
Yes.
And so we have like two ends on the ladder, like one, or countries that are economically very strong and countries that are not so strong. And my question is, how would you, or what is your solution to deal with these kind of problems?
As I said before, I really believe that, no, let me take another starting point this time. We are in the first stages of what I want to call the fourth industrial revolution. The world is changing faster and more profoundly than in the previous three industrial revolutions in our history. Because this industrial revolution affects every single human being on the planet at the same time. And this will change the economy. It will change the labor markets. It will change economic structures. Just imagine artificial intelligence, what that will have as an effect on how we live and produce. We are now creating machines that at some point will start thinking for themselves. We have no idea what this means for our world in the future. Robotics. A lot of manual work will be done by robots in the future. And for many people, that's a scary thing. But for other people, and I'm one of them, it's also a huge opportunity to let people do jobs that are less tiresome and less monotonous, and let robots do that work. The resources will change. Our economy will have to be a sustainable economy. We can't continue to burn up our natural resources. We get a shortage of water, of clean air, of precious metals, of energy resources. So this all will have to change. And it is my deep conviction that countries in Europe are too small, even the biggest, to do this on their own. We have two types of member states in the European Union. Small member states and member states who do not know yet that they are small member states. But there are no big member states if you look at a global scale. And if we want to mobilize the incredible strength of 500 million Europeans, we can only mobilize them if they have the feeling they are part of that. And we can only mobilize that if we decrease the differences between countries. So the richest countries in Europe, like the Netherlands and Germany, have a vested interest in making sure that other countries in the East and the South catch up with us. It is in our direct interest that it happens. It is not, it's not giving away things. It's sharing a common future. We need the strength of 500 million more optimistic Europeans in a strong economy to face the fundamental changes that are coming anyway. Because this is my bottom line. You can follow my reasoning and say, we want to do this together and we want to be active and we want to be proactive in shaping the future. But you can also say, okay, no, we'll sit where we are, we'll keep everybody out, and we'll keep what we have. You can do that, and you'll be okay for the next 5, 10, 15 years. But after that, reality will catch up with us. And then we are no longer people who are able to shape our own futures. Our futures will be shaped in China and the United States and elsewhere, and not by us. And this is not going to happen on my watch if I can do anything about it. So we need to mobilize Europeans for an optimistic project for 500 million people who share broadly very profound values.
So no division into a fast and a slow Europe, a northern and a southern part.
No, I think what is weakening us today are two big differences in Europe. The differences have gotten too big. We need to close the gap between those countries who are lagging behind economically. And it's possible, it's not all that difficult, but we need to believe in our capacity to do that.
Thank you. Let's go on to the next one, because yeah, we're pretty much we're doing fine time-wise. The next one is Borders and Restrictions of Europe, which will be led in by another small movie. There's almost 65 million people, refugees at this time worldwide.
Yes.
Rag and Bone Man was singing, "We're only human, after all, don't put the blame on me." Are we forgetting the fact that these are human beings every once in a while?
You know, at the height of this crisis in 2015, when we were all struggling with it, and I was put in charge of the talks with Turkey, and it looked pretty hopeless, Europe was torn by two sentiments. On the one hand, this incredible outpour of solidarity. You know, 1.2 million people arriving in Europe. Nobody was left in the streets, perhaps for 1 or 2 nights maximum. And this was not done by authorities. This was not done by official. This could only be done because millions of Europeans felt responsible for fellow human beings coming from other parts of the world and helped them. That was manifestly the fact in many European countries. especially those countries worst affected, Germany, Austria, Sweden, the Netherlands to some extent. At the same time, in those months, difficult months in 2015, there was another feeling in European society, oh my God, we don't have this under control. And it is a real human emotion, which you have to understand, that you show solidarity with somebody else in his or her plight, until the moment that you feel that you are drowning yourself, metaphorically. Then this feeling of solidarity becomes less because you are worried too much about yourself. And that's what we also saw in European society. This cannot go on. We can't receive them. And then people create a bit, to protect themselves, create a bit more distance vis-à-vis the plight of the people in trouble, the refugees. So we had to do two things. We had to continue to show enormous solidarity in different ways, but we also had to prove that we as public authorities were able to manage this even if we can't solve it. Mm-hmm. And I think by now we have proven that we haven't solved it by a long stretch. We still need to do many things, but we are no longer in a position that Europe believes we can't control this. And now you see solidarity increasing again. And also some of the elements of the agreements we reached with Turkey in managing this are becoming more and more successful, step by step. And I hope we can use that experience to create a more sustainable more sustainable solution for migration, because as was rightly put in this film, this is going to be a problem that's going to be with us long term.
Long time, yes.
Long term.
Very, very important issue at this moment. Questions on this subject? Hands, please. Yes.
The Islamophobia, refugee problem, and increasing terrorist incidents have influenced the shaking of the existential security perception of some societies.
Yes.
European Union should play a more binding or pioneering role with the decision to be made in the fields of which areas, you think?
I think you are right, these things are all connected. Even if based on the facts you could say there is no connection, emotionally and politically, for most people, there is a connection. You know, this whole bringing together the migration crisis, and most refugees coming to Europe happen to be Muslims or from Muslim countries. You combine that with this jihadi ideology that is completely nihilist and that finds justification in killing other fellow human beings, which is incomprehensible and absolutely unacceptable. And you combine that with the fear that cultures might be changed because so many people from other nations come. And all this combined creates a feeling of anxiety in Europe. And we know in our history that fear can be an incredibly strong political motivator. Fear can be, if you're a politician and you want to play on fear, you can become extremely popular. The problem with fear, though, is it is so hungry. It needs to be fed all the time. So for fear to be fed all the time, you have to prove all the time that fear is justified. And to prove that fear is justified, you have to make more scarier and scarier stories by the day. And this is a process we have seen in Europe over quite a number of years now. Some of the stories are justified. We have a huge challenge to our way of life by people who hate our way of life and who believe, because they hate us so much, that they have the right to kill us. Those people need to be combated, need to be put in jail, or need to be brought back to reason, but we cannot accept that. And we need to fight with everything we have against this jihadi nonsense. But to go from there in sort of putting all Muslims in one batch and saying every single Muslim is a potential terrorist is destroying our society. And we should also fight that. And we cannot just put the onus on Muslims themselves. You know, my background is I'm a Catholic. if people would say, you should excuse the Spanish Inquisition. It was, are you crazy? I'm not responsible for the Spanish Inquisition. Or you should excuse the IRA bomb attacks in Northern Ireland in the past. It was, are you crazy? I'm not responsible for that. Yes, but you're a Catholic, they are Catholics, so you're responsible. That is the same reasoning we sometimes apply to our own Muslim community, which is, I think, highly unfair. But having said that, we also need to create a situation where being a religious person is no longer in contradiction with being in an open society like ours, as we have done with other religions. And I think this is the way forward. I think we need to understand that we have our own brand of Islam in Europe, and that Islam should be open to other ideas, should be tolerant of other ideas, as is the tradition in Islam, frankly. Only we've forgotten sometimes about this. But Europe is diverse. And I think the most destructive thing we could do is to fight diversity. It's like, you know, you have scrambled eggs and then you say, oh, I scrambled my eggs. No, I'd rather not have scrambled eggs. I want the sunny side up. I'll unscramble them. You can try. You know, it's a challenge. Try. And anyone who's successful, give me a call and I'll come and see.
It gets your hands dirty.
But it gets everything messy. Yeah. And it's the same with our societies. Our societies are diverse. We have to embrace that. We have to make a success of it. But we don't need to propagate the nonsense that we can completely disentangle a society that is diverse. That is destructive for our society, and it doesn't make us stronger in light of the challenges of the future. So that would be my answer to your complicated question. You know, and fear has another element, which I need to mention. If you are afraid, you will only look for confirmation of your fear. That's a human, that's in our brain, in the core of our animal brain is this: if you are afraid because you are under threat, you will not see anything that dispels the fear, but you will see confirmation of that fear everywhere. And there are too many politicians in Europe who play on that. And we need to stand up, all of us, and say, we will not be driven by fear. We will be driven by confidence. We will solve this together. We are so much stronger together.
Thank you. Anyone else with a question on this subject? Yes, over there. I'll come and have a microphone for you. Here you go.
I'm Ibro from Germany, and you talked about successful interaction with Turkey, and I heard that currently money is giving to Turkey to help the refugees there, but can you tell me more precisely what projects are successful?
Yes, yes. We're spending, this year we will have spent almost 3 billion euros on that. We don't give that to Turkey or to the Turkish government or Turkish authorities. What we do with that, we issue credit cards to refugees, and with these credit cards they go and buy food, they can go and buy food, which is an extremely successful project. And they've got a PIN code on that, so they can't be forced to give away their money or to spend it on something else. They can buy food and some clothing with that credit card. It's a very successful project. There's one I want to mention. Secondly, we are building schools in the parts of Turkey you saw for children to go to school. Not all of them are going to school yet. Sometimes parents are in dire straits economically, so they let them work. We try and help them to send all their kids to school. Because especially for the Syrian refugees, these kids went to school. Syria was a middle-income country. They had experience of going to school. So we are now helping the local school administrations and local authorities in Turkey to build schools. And we're doing it very fast, and it's increasingly successful. We also help build hospitals and provide medical equipment. Because you saw a refugee camp in the film, but of the almost 3 million refugees in Turkey today, only a small percentage is in refugee camps. The overwhelming majority is in villages and cities all across Turkey. And of course, they don't have, these cities and villages, enough facilities. So we help them build that. And we work through humanitarian organizations. We do a tremendous lot with UNHCR and other UN organizations, other NGOs. And I have to say, this is arguably one of the most successful support programs the European Union has ever developed, and arguably one of the programs where we've been able to spend more than in other programs. And I'm frankly quite proud of this. A lot of people in Turkey, in Greece, at the European Commission, but especially in the NGO community, put a tremendous lot of effort to help people who are really in a difficult situation. So that's where we spend the money.
I want to know, we still have 15 minutes, around 15 minutes left. Is there one more question on this subject? Because I think this, you see, this is a very popular subject. Let me see, because we have 2 more subjects to go, but if this one is really as important as I can tell, then we'll go on this one. Do you agree? Thank you very much. Yes, go ahead.
That was from the Netherlands, and after this successful Turkey contract, there are people who want to make this contract with more countries in Africa. And in Dutch politics, we have a bit of a controversy from left parties saying that, one lefty party saying that that would lead to inhumane circumstances. What do you think about that?
Well, a couple of remarks about that. First of all, there are no perfect solutions. So yes, some things don't work well enough yet in Greece with how people are received. In Turkey it's going better, and not everybody's happy with that. But I know one thing for sure. It was absolutely impossible to go on in the same way as we did in 2015. Europe could not have another 1.2 million people arriving in one season. That politically would have been impossible to handle. And then, as I said before, people would feel so threatened that they didn't want to see any refugees anymore in Europe. And then we would have a real humanitarian crisis. So yes, I accept some criticism of what we have done, but I haven't seen any viable alternative that we could have used. And I invite everyone to give me viable alternatives. But those, also in my corner of the political movements, who say we should have let everybody just come, I think are not painting a fair situation. That would have been impossible for the European society to digest. Simply impossible. We saw what happened in 2015. The repetition of that would have been extremely difficult to digest. But now some say we should have the same sort of agreements with other nations. There are 2 elements that are comparable with the situation in Africa or Northern Africa. One, we need to break the business model of the smugglers. There are smugglers who are making billions exploiting the misery of refugees. They did that between Turkey and Greece. They're now doing it in the southern Mediterranean. We need to do something about that. So that means we need to stop people getting into the boats in some way or form. Secondly, we need also to have agreements with other nations about this, because you can't do this on your own. Those are the 2 parallels. But there are huge differences between the people who came through Turkey at the time in Greece, where people of overwhelming majority had the right to international protection. These people were fleeing from war and persecution. The overwhelming majority of the people arriving in Italy today are economic migrants. They are not fleeing from persecution, just looking for a better life. So they don't have an automatic right to international protection, to stay, to asylum. That's a huge difference. The other difference is you don't have central authorities in many of these countries, like in Turkey, where you can have agreements and then count on them to execute them. And thirdly, these countries have other interests they want to defend. The Turkish relationship with Europe is a long-standing one and a profound one over decades. The relationship with African countries is different. So you need to look at different subjects of mutual interest. What is in it for them? For us, it's clear. We want to be able to manage migration. But what is in it for African countries? I would say development. I would say investment. I would say fair trade. And let's see what we can do with those countries in those areas. That is looking towards the future. Why am I insisting so much on these African countries? Africa's population is going to grow exponentially. And paradoxically, the less they develop, And the more unstable Africa stays, the bigger the demographic growth will be, and so the more migrational pressure will be on Europe. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people extra in Africa. So if we can help Africa increase its rate of development and investment, etc., we can also empower women to make other choices rather than just having babies to survive, which in many African countries is still sadly the situation today. So providing education for girls, providing ways of family planning for women, providing economic development, etc., are all part of a big plan so that we invest now, so that we don't have to face a problem 20 years down the road that we cannot handle. If poverty in Africa persists with the population growth they have now, these people only have one way to go, and that is north. And that will not help Africa, nor will it help Europe. So we need to act now to avoid bigger problems in the future.
Okay, I have one last question. You over there, you were raising your hand, were you? You? Yes. Go ahead. One last question on this subject, and I promise you, I'll give you the microphone. I promise you that the movies made for the last two categories will be shown. So you didn't do it for nothing. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Do from Istanbul. So my question is, freedom of expression or political correctness with the increasing use of xenophobic, racist and sexist content in political speech across the world, should stricter regulations on hate speech in Europe be implemented?
Yes, I think there should be in some areas. I think too many young, disgruntled Europeans with an Islamic background have been brainwashed by content they can find on the internet. This is dangerous stuff. Dangerous stuff. It poisons their minds and makes them dangerous to their own society. And I think we have a collective responsibility, but especially the providers on the internet, to check their own content on these issues. I think we need to have a debate on that. You know, the freedom of expression is one of the great successes of free societies. And we have to protect that. We have to protect that because it's not a given everywhere. In some countries, very many journalists are in prison, and that saddens me terribly. But with the freedom of expression also comes responsibility to not go beyond the borders that are set by the law. But also, you know, like in the United States, freedom of expression is incredibly important. Incredibly important. But there is a ruling of the Supreme Court in the United States, the highest judges in the United States, where they said, yes, there is freedom of expression, but that does not give you the freedom to cry fire in a movie theater, because then you do something that endangers other people. And I think this is a good definition. I think freedom of expression, yes, I believe in it. But you also have a responsibility under the law, but also morally, vis-a-vis other human beings. And it's become sort of a game to say, oh, look at me, I'm so cool. I use my freedom of expression to degrade women, to sexualize women, to put them in another. Oh, isn't that cool? No, it's not. It's sick and it's childish. And I think we should not regulate by law, but take a stance on this. We had one of these events recently in the Netherlands where we didn't regulate, government didn't interfere, but people who felt insulted spoke out, and they got a lot of support for that, and that corrected the behavior of some. So it's not just things you can do by law, but preferably you should be doing them by law, but it's also the common sense in society that needs to be mobilized. Because the strongest people in our society are also the most silent people in our society. And very often this, look at Twitter or social media. Look at the comments, I'm getting them now. You could go to my Facebook page, you can see some of the comments, you'd be astonished. But I'm also sure that if I would meet these people in person and be in a dialogue like with you now, it would be a different matter altogether. So, you know, it is also our collective responsibility, if we want to be in a dialogue, to also have, you know, a bit of rules of the game we respect, without a referee having to stand there to correct you all the time. Because A dialogue is impossible if the other person is so aggressive and so angry that he insults you all the time that you don't want to hear about it. And we need dialogue more than ever before in our society.
Thank you. So, for the last two categories, I think it's a good thing to watch the movie, because you've been working very hard on that. So we'll watch the movie, and maybe afterwards you can shortly comment on the movie. Maybe that's a good thing to do for the last two subcategories.
Come, Evan, we're going to get some food before we go on holiday. Alright, I'm coming!
German Kaiserbroodgen, French olives. Wow, look at all this food from different European countries.
Yeah, delicious, isn't it? You know who did that?
No?
Europe did that. I'm so excited to go on vacation.
Yes, me too.
Oh, damn it. The car doesn't start. I'm so happy that we have a guarantee for 2 years.
We have?
Yes, Europe did that.
Oh no!
What?
I forgot to change my money in Spanish money.
Don't worry, you didn't have to.
Really?
Yes, you can pay in Spain with the same money we have in Holland. You know who made it possible?
No?
Europe did that.
There's the border.
Oh, that is fast.
Yes, I'm going to turn off my internet.
Oh, no need for that.
But that costs a lot of money, right?
No, not anymore.
Really?
Yes, you can use your internet wherever you want in Europe.
Wow!
You know who made that possible?
No?
Europe did. Oh look, there's the border.
Yes, I see it. I will grab my passport.
Why?
Because of the border control.
There is no border control anymore. Look, we can just easily drive across all borders in Europe.
Whoa, who took care of that?
Europe did. Huh? The police want to stop.
Excuse me, sir. Can I see your driver's license?
Of course.
Thank you very much. You look way younger in room.
Yeah, I've let my hair grown.
Okay, I see. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Yes, you too, sir.
Bye.
Bye.
Was het oké?
Yes. My Dutch driving license is valid in all of Europe. You know who made it possible?
No?
Europe did. After this tonight, you go on YouTube.
Yeah.
You look up Monty Python,
Yeah.
The Life of Brian. You look up What Have the Romans Ever Done for Us. Look that up. And you are right up there with Monty Python, my friend. This is brilliant. Very well done. Very well done. And so you know, the most important character in that film was a guy hanging from the rearview mirror. He is born in this city. His father worked in the docks for many years. His name is Nathan Rutjes. He's a personal friend of mine, a very close friend. He's a football player in my team in the south of the country, Rode SC.
Best hairdo ever. Yeah.
And he's the most positive dude you can find across Europe. And he's from Rotterdam.
I think every European police officer should be wearing an AC/DC t-shirt from now on. So let's go on to the last subcategory, Futures and Dreams of Europe. Last movie for us to see.
There are several factors of the European Union what we can talk about. For example, the immigrational situation. And I think Europe can get rid of this immigrational situation because if they pull themselves together, they can easily solve everything, every single problem. The other situation is the language problem, and I think every children should get the right language acquisition to speak foreign language.
Okay, so future and dreams of Europe. From the Hungarian's perspective, I think the most important theme is education for me, especially as a teacher. I personally prepare my students for foreign universities located all over Europe, and not only in Prague or Krakow, but in the Great Britain as well. And I think it's one of the most important markets that we are now entering, and we have to be prepared to participate in these educational spheres because they provide us with all kinds of skills, and for Hungarians especially, communication and teamwork and everything that does not include hierarchy and does not include rigid traditions that we are so aware of from the Soviet Union and we really want to get rid of. And I think this is the most important message a European might have for us.
Okay, so in my opinion, the European Union is getting in a declining position because of a lot of the immigrants. The east side is getting worse, but the west side is getting worse as well.
While Europe is in constant growth, we ourselves have much we can do to help our society improve our lives. Europe's plans contain many smaller steps, such as leveling the salaries to give equal rights to women, which is still yet to be acquired. Hardworking people live and do their jobs in harsh environments and get paid much less than the people who sit in office and do almost nothing at all. They got a proper education, and that's all that counts in our society.
Future, yes. So the future and dreams, to round this up, future and dreams, for you personally, because you've been working really, really hard over the last 2.5 years. For you personally, what the future of Europe?
Well, I think
is there one particular thing, maybe?
When I was a professor at university, I said the same thing, and I'll say it to you tonight. Nothing is beyond salvation. Everything is possible. I dream about my kids' generation, about your generation. You are capable of anything. There is not a problem so difficult in Europe that you cannot solve it. Perhaps you should sometimes revisit the experience of your grandparents and ask them how it was like to live under communist dictatorship, under military dictatorship, through the war. This is one of the cities that was affected most in the Netherlands in the May days of 1940 when it was bombarded by the Germans. The Germans are today our best friends. So if you see what our grandparents, my grandparents went through an economic crisis in the 1930s, they almost starved. And then they went through war, and then they went to building up society. If we can just imagine what they had to do, then what you need to do by comparison is not impossible. The only thing I would want to ask you to do is agree with me, disagree with me, hate what I say, like what I say, fine. But don't be indifferent. Never become indifferent. Because if I have one worry, is that your generation is actually not dissatisfied enough and slightly indifferent. And sometimes you believe if you put your opinion on Facebook or on Twitter, that changes the world. Well, I have news for you, it doesn't. So if you really want to shape and change the world, you need to get together with other people. You need to storm the institutions, take them and shape them in your image, how you want the world to be. And I am optimistic today because I believe in you, profoundly believe in my own kids and in all of you, in your capacity to be true Europeans, to be true to our destiny, common destiny as Europeans. But never become indifferent. Indifference is our enemy. It is worse to be indifferent than to hate, because hatred comes with some emotion and that can change. So if I have one plea today, never become indifferent, and you can shape the world in your image, a better world than today, a more together world than today, and a world that reflects your ideals and your values. That was my message for tonight. Only a few words to say. Teşekkür, köszönöm szépen. What is it in Polish? Dziękuję, dankeschön, dank u wel, fijne avond.
Ja, ik vond het bijzonder. I thought it was very special for. Yeah, sorry. I thought it was very special for you to be here amongst all these young people. And well, you heard the message. Take it with you, and give him one more round of applause. The first vice president of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans. We're going to Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your questions. After that, we have drinks, because after 1.5 hours, we can use a drink, I think. We have drinks. Thank you very much. And as the great John Lennon, the singer of this song, said, before Elvis Presley, there was nobody. After John Lennon, there's you people. Do something with it, okay? Thank you very much.